Hey, Carrie, how's it going?
Good. I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, me too. Uh it's been something that's been on my mind and on my heart, this whole topic of vulnerability and visibility and especially in my own business, it's something I've been working on. So I'm really excited to kind of break it down and share some, hopefully some helpful ideas for how to get through this. So before we dive in, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners and just talk about your business?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the opportunity. So, my name's Carrie Anderson. I am a business coach and launch tech strategist. And I started my business about 7 years ago after wanting to leave the day job grind. I'm sure a lot of us have been through that. And I was working in my day job with entrepreneurs, mainly speakers. I worked for the National Speakers Association. So I knew that it was possible to own your own business. And I was helping small business owners, but I wanted to be more in the business instead of just kind of higher level. So I started my business doing online marketing. I actually considered myself a virtual assistant for a while. And it really took off in the online marketing space and specifically in online course launches, which is a big passion of mine. When I was in college, I was going to school to be an elementary school teacher, and that didn't pan out, but I still loved this idea of learning and teaching. So the online course marketplace is so huge right now, and there are so many opportunities to teach online and to learn online. And so, yeah, I just kind of have found my niche in working with course creators online, helping them launch from every step of the email marketing that goes along with it to social media to getting growing your audience, getting new followers in that way, and people who would actually want to take your classes. And then also in the course content creation itself of like how to format it, how many classes to launch, where to put it once it's recorded, those kinds of pieces too.
Cool. Yeah, that's so uh just needed right now because I think a lot of people are like they know they want to do a course or they're like thinking about it, and if you aren't very tech savvy, or even if you are, but there's so many platforms now, there's so many options, and so it can feel super overwhelming to like see what to do. Yeah, that's so interesting that you like, so did you actually end up teaching at all, or did you just like train and then never?
No, I didn't graduate with my teaching certificate because I got to the point where I had to student teach and was like, yeah, this is not for me. And I was already doing well with my other efforts in marketing. So I was like, I think this is more aligned with where I'm going. But I still, every once in a while, I think maybe I should be a teacher. And I'm like, nah, I, I have my new path now.
Yeah, I mean, teachers to me are warriors. They're like so
Totally.
impressive. Um, so yeah, so I mean, we're in the same mastermind, right? And so we were just talking about our podcasts and all that. You have a podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called the Your Best Selfie podcast.
Your Best Selfie. I love that.
Yep.
Um, and so we were talking about a bunch of things, but one of the topics that I guess you brought to the table was especially women-owned wellness businesses, because I think the work they do is just so important. And obviously, a lot of the listeners are wellness, health and wellness businesses. But there's just this big, uh, I don't want to call it a block, but it is, I don't want to make it feel so heavy, but just like showing up, showing your face, being vulnerable, like more and more, a lot of, there's just so many examples of women doing this, but it's still really scary. And there's just like, I feel like so many years of healing. I don't know if you've heard like the witch wound and those sort of things, but like just like healing and showing up and showing our faces, whatever that is, like whatever business you're in, just like showing your face, showing yourself, being vulnerable, but also tying that into your business, right, in a sometimes strategic and not strategic way. And so what do you feel is like, I guess, the biggest struggle around this, and what have been like, I'm curious to hear your own journey around that as well, because I'm sure you've had to do your own work around vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, I think that I want to highlight something that you said, which is that so many people are doing this now. Like, I think we are so inundated with seeing other people seemingly crush it online
Right.
that it starts to be overwhelming to ourselves. Like, oh, I'm not like her. I can't show up in the same way she does. And I think that that really holds us back. A lot of times it's people in the same marketplace as us.
Yeah.
So it might even seem like the marketplace is saturated already.
Yeah.
And that is why it's even more important to show your face, to be vulnerable online, and to really show up as who you are. Because when people are looking for a health and wellness coach or a therapist or somebody, they're looking for somebody really that they can know, like, and trust. And when you are just hiding behind, like, just, a pretty graphic, which I love graphics, don't get me wrong, like, there's definitely a place for that in the online marketplace as well. But the people who are going to come to you and want to work specifically with you are attracted to you because you're showing your face, because you're talking online, because you're sharing vulnerably. And that's really the secret sauce to your growing your audience online,
Yeah.
is being who you truly are, so that people can see you and you stand out in the sea of people that are doing it. But yeah, it's important to not compare yourself to where others are, because for some people that might look at like going live every single day or posting stories of them talking. For other people, it might be all they can do is go live once a week. And that even feels like a stretch and feels overwhelming. So it's just important to start the process of dipping your toe in. And then from there, you really get practice with it and become more comfortable with showing up online.
Yeah, or even finding I always tell my clients, like, if you don't really jive with social media, which, maybe a lot of the podcast listeners don't, like, could you start a podcast? Could you do a YouTube channel? Um, there's so many different ways now. And yeah, there's trends so that, maybe you do see there is a trend to do like reels or TikTok or whatever. And it's okay to experiment, but it is about finding that platform where you can be you, and like don't take away the power of like a really well written email. Like, how many of us are so connected with um yeah, businesses that have incredible websites or incredible email, like a newsletter that goes out consistently, whether that's monthly, weekly, whatever consistent means to you. And that just creates that connection. And it's not about necessarily dancing around, right, and like pointing to things. That's not
No,
vulnerable.
no, no. Yeah. And it's all about meeting your people where they are too. So
Yeah.
if it feels really fun to you to have a TikTok, like, cool, go be on TikTok because your people are there. If it feels really fun to you to be able to sit down and write a blog and email it out, then do that. Like, lean into what feels fun and interesting for you
Yeah.
to create content. And then again, that's like where you are being most vulnerable, where you can show up as your best self. And then other people will find you there and love you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I think for a lot of people, it's like they don't know, maybe. So the podcast, there are people who are starting, but there's a lot of people who've been online for a while. And since things evolve quickly, or I should say, as things evolve, it's like you are constantly experimenting with new platforms. So for example, I tried Clubhouse for a while,
Yeah.
and I
Been there,
really
done that.
I like talking. Like, I have a podcast, I like talking, but I would found it really draining because I felt like I was having to be, yeah, and like calls and like giving so much value up front. And again, don't get me wrong, Clubhouse is great. I'm sure there's lots of people who listen to Clubhouse and like Clubhouse. But what I like try with these, when new platforms come out or trends or whatever, it's like, let's try it, see how I feel, let's see where my energy goes, and then just giving myself permission to like back out or like tone it down or whatever, right? And I think that's also part of the vulnerability, because you feel like you said, like we compare ourselves to others and it looks like it's a smart move, but you need to connect with like what's really genuine to me and like what feels good to me, and also what makes sense for my business at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, totally. And I love trying out new platforms. Another benefit to that is like you're with new people on any given platform. It's kind of a fresh start. Like, for a long time, people people were only on Facebook. And now I have so many clients that just don't want to do Facebook because it's all like the people that they went to high school with and like family, friends that they haven't seen for 20 years, you know? So going to a new platform kind of gives you that fresh start to be able to really make a name for yourself and to be able to be a little bit more vulnerable when it
Yeah.
might feel harder to do that on like a Facebook Live, for example.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to get into this idea of like being vulnerable. So I recently did a podcast episode about becoming a mom and like what I learned. And to me, that was very vulnerable, but I was able to connect it back to lessons in my business, right? So do you feel like there's this line of like, should I be vulnerable? Like, what's the objective? The vulnerability creates this connection, creates this trust, creates this opportunity for someone to like get to know your personality and like how you work and that sort of thing. But I think there's also vulnerability, especially for health and wellness, to show your own results, right? And to show this is how I've like done my work in my life. But do you feel like there's this line of like being vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable and you're like sharing things that have nothing to do with your business? Like, how do you guide your clients with that like scale of like, where's my vulnerability, going?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody, and you need to know what your boundaries are.
Yeah.
Like some people don't want to talk about their kids at all online, and that's cool for them. For me, like I like sharing about my kids because I feel like it connects with other moms. Jasmine Star, I'm not sure if you know her, but she has great advice that she only shares things that she would tell somebody that was sitting next to her on an airplane.
Oh, that's
So I
good.
love those kinds of thoughts of like,
Yeah.
how much do I share online? I'm for sharing more. You know, there is like an opportunity to be a little bit more vulnerable, and I love like you sharing about how being a mom aligns with business because you're going to connect with moms, and also just it's something that you're going through and learning. Like don't underestimate the fact that you're also doing this as a cool document that someday your daughter might listen to and be like, oh, that's so cool that my mom was thinking that at this point. Like it doesn't always have to be a marketing tactic.
Yeah.
It can still just be something that's on your heart that you feel like sharing, for documentation purposes and just to show that you're showing up from a heart-centered place.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I feel again, we're in an industry, especially if you're looking to attract women clients and other health and wellness, clients, is we want to get to know the person behind the business. We want to get to know like, what do you do in your free time? Like I always put like I watch Gilmore Girls and I'm obsessed with it
Yes.
and like rewatch it over and over. I have an addiction.
Same.
And it's like my therapy, and maybe there's some people who connect with that and others who don't, but it's a very clear picture. And so you can easily kind of decide, is Cynthia for me or, whatever. And so at the end of the day, that vulnerability, it kind of does draw a line in the sand. And I think that's the fear, is like, oh, someone's going to like unsubscribe or whatever. But that's a good thing, right? Because you are
Yeah.
really warming up your audience with people who really do have a connection with you. So when they're ready to hire you, or they're really ready and they're really there and they get you.
Totally. And it stings a little bit when somebody unsubscribes. I'm not going to lie. You see their name and you're like, what? How could they not like my content? But I always just am like, okay, bye, on to the next. Let's keep growing. And then you know that those, like less than 1% of unsubscribers are not meant for you, and they wouldn't want to buy your content and work with you anyway. So
Yeah.
why have them there?
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like it's also like a muscle. Like someone recently, I have a friend who she's just opened an Instagram account for a project she's doing, kind of starting a business. And she did her first live recently, and she told me like I had a vulnerability like hangover or something like that. Like after that live, she just couldn't do anything for a couple hours or a couple, even the next few days, like she couldn't post or whatever. And I was saying, okay, that's a good sign. Like you're just building your resistance. Like at the beginning, when you start sharing and any platform, it takes like this momentum and this energy. And then you start getting in the habit of it and you start to realize, hey, like this is kind of fun actually, like sharing parts of my life and being open with my audience. in a curated way or not so curated, depending on your, like you said, depending on your style. Like there's some people who share a lot more than I would ever share on social media, on Instagram in particular.
Yeah.
Like things like bed shots, or yeah, there's certain like angles and things where it's like, wow, that's quite intimate. But that's them. That's what works for them, and that's their threshold. So you have to find like what is your threshold, like you said, and like put in those rules first for yourself, and then like allow yourself to like practice and like get into the habit of it, and over time it kind of gets easier.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. Practice is the biggest thing. But a lot of times that doesn't sound real fun when you're just starting out and it's like, but I just want to be good at it now. But it totally is a practice game. And in terms of the vulnerability hangover, it is a real thing. We all go through it. I mean, even I still totally come up against those moments. And my advice for something like that is if and when you know you're going to be sharing, to have a few posts ready for the next few days
Yeah.
so that you already have it written, because it's so hard once you share like that to start overthinking everything. Whereas if you can just jam out like your posts for a week and then you share the vulnerable thing, you at least have some in the can ready to go for your times when you're feeling like, oh no, it's like, nope, this is already created. So I'm just going to share it and push it out. It makes it easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I mean, I want to come back to this topic that you said at the beginning around like so yeah, your thoughts on the market being saturated. What do you say to your client when they come to you with that kind of like objection of like, I don't need to create content, like someone already talked about this. Like, why should I, get out there and talk about it?
Yeah, this just happened to me earlier this week. I have a newsletter ready to go out about this because a client came to me and she's like, well, I don't really show up in the same way as her or as her. And I'm like, what? Like, you in my mind are so different from those women. Like,
Yeah.
yes, they're teaching on the same thing. In this case, it was astrology. I work with a lot of astrologers. But I was like, yeah, they're both astrologers, but you have such a unique viewpoint to add to the conversation. So it was like mind blowing to me that she would even say that. And I think it's really like, calling up your best friend or somebody who can support you, of being like, no, you're awesome. Like you kind of have to be that for yourself sometimes
Yeah.
and just root yourself on, because it's so easy to see all the people in your industry because you are following all the people in your industry because that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah.
But for example, if you are a yoga teacher, maybe you're following 100 different yoga teachers, you're seeing all their content and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, they already did this pose on the internet today. I can't do this again. But you might be the only yoga teacher in somebody else's feed. So it's just remembering to show up, to own your message. For me, one of my biggest pieces of advice is just remembering that your message is more important than your ego. Because if you can show up and really lead with your why or your message or what it is that you hope to bring in the transformation of the people that are following you, then it doesn't matter how you look or if your hair looks crazy. Like you've seen all the people in all different ranges of being put together online, and it doesn't matter. The people who have the messages that resonate with you are the ones that are really going to rise to the top of your interest level.
Yeah. I love that. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, and that goes back to like, especially for health and wellness, but even me as an SEO expert, I've like been going, kind of like swallowing my own medicine of like going back and like doing my own SEO, like looking and going through my process of like, if I need this, like if I'm needing whatever message I'm getting out, like whether it's an email or, a post or whatever, if I need it, there's a high chance there's someone else who does need it as well. And the way I'm saying it, the way the words I'm using, but also my vibe, someone is going to hear that in a way that they've never heard it before, and it's going to help them in a special way. And so you have to trust, even if you are talking about all the same things your industry is talking about, the way you say it, the way you express yourself, that's unique. And so that's what's going to come across. And so sometimes it's more about the way that someone explains something, right? Or their vibe, or even like aesthetically, like certain things, like their sense of humor, saying it through a joke, or whatever, right? Like that, that's the differentiator for a lot of brands. And reminding yourself of that. And so leaning more and more into your story. And then we, we can go into things like there's no one with your skin color who said it that way, or no one like with your, your demographics and all that. So we need just more of that vulnerability and that visibility across everybody. And it's just going to help, right? More people, more of the people who are just naturally resonating with you.
Yeah, totally. Nobody has the same stories as you. So it's important for all of us to show up in our own way, and that will resonate. I love that.
Yeah, so good. I needed this for me.
Good. I know. And you had mentioned like, it's harder to do it for yourself to do these kinds of things. And it is for me too. But I was realizing as I was writing this newsletter about my friend saying, oh, I'm not like her or her, and comparing yourself to others, like I needed to hear the message that I was writing out too. So a lot of
Exactly.
these things, like your ideal client is yourself. You could just be writing something and go back a week from now and read it again and be like, oh man, Carrie, how did you miss that? Like you were writing it for yourself. So I think that anything that you feel, guaranteed somebody else on the internet has felt or is feeling at one point or another. So again, another reason to show up online authentically, because you never know what is that piece that's going to really touch somebody and make them want to connect with you.
Yeah. Has this ever happened to you where you write like a newsletter, a post, and then you reread it and you're like, I wrote that? Like, whoa, that's kind of
All the
good. Like,
time. All the time. I have an assistant right now who I just said, I just scrolled back and read an old post and it was really good. So can you go through and just take them all and we can repurpose them? Because I don't remember writing them. So I'm sure people don't remember reading them all the
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell my clients like, yeah, write from like what you need to hear. Obviously, I think we do sometimes that unconsciously or subconsciously, but if you struggle with that, just pretend you're writing. Like I'll just be typing and I'll try to imagine that I'm talking to my ideal person, like my ideal client, right? And I really try and get into like what are they struggling with, like what are they feeling? Like if I was just sitting across from them at like a coffee shop, what would I be saying? And that helps a lot with the words flowing out, because you suddenly realize, like you said, it's not about you, it's not your ego. Like get over that, tough love. Like this is really about helping someone who's like maybe never heard about what you've done before. They've never for an astrologist, like they know about it but they've never seen that transformation like you have. And so they need to hear what you have to say. And so then suddenly it's like it's not about you and your stories. It's like, oh, there's someone out there who really needs this. I'm just going to write it. And it kind of
Yeah.
like simplifies things.
Yeah, totally. And in the astrologer example, I have learned from so many different astrologers, and it's pretty much all the same content, but hearing it from other people and their perspectives just brings a new light to it. So I'm
Yeah.
sure it's the same in whatever industry you're in. Even if you hear the same thing a bunch of times, it's just a little bit different perspective from somebody can change the game for you. So keep going and keep sharing how you feel.
I love it. Yeah. So just to kind of wrap up the conversation, what would be like your number one tip for someone who's like, okay, I'm ready. I want to be vulnerable, but I really am struggling with the confidence piece. Like, how would you tell them to approach that?
Yeah, I think we already kind of covered this, but for me, it's really just putting your message first. There's like this funny meme that says like nobody cares about my content, sad face, and then nobody cares about my content, smiley face. It's like no, in reality, nobody is really as in it as you are. So holding your message as the important part, showing up with confidence in that piece of your story can really help other people, then it doesn't matter so much what you look like. And yes, like, put on some mascara, feel good about yourself, like when you go online, especially if you're live like this. Um, but yeah, I think just holding your message as your really key cornerstone is the most important part to getting over that fear and stepping out vulnerably to share it, because you never know who you'll impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say it just gets kind of easy. It's like it's practice.
Practice.
Like
Totally.
I still find I'm still not Like there's things that I'm shaky in or I'm not confident in, but when you see that, when you get that message of someone who's like, thank you, or that email where they're like, wow, this was really helpful, it just quickly fades away and it almost doesn't matter anymore. It's like, whatever, I wasn't confident, like I just did it the best I could. And you get more confident the more you do it, basically.
Yeah, it's just pushing through like 20 seconds of courage is
Yeah.
really what you need to be like, take a deep breath, push that live button, push the record button, and push through that initial piece. And then once you get rolling and talking, it kind of just fades away and you're
Yeah.
just in your own little world talking about your message and what's important to you.
Yeah. I love that. Cool. Oh, this is so good. I needed this.
Yay. I loved it
Speaking
too.
of message for yourself. So, where can people hang out with you? Talk more about your podcast. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called the Your Best Selfie podcast, which hopefully Cynthia will be on soon too, all about showing up as your best self at home and online. And you can find me on Instagram at Hey Carrie And then I also sent a free download that you can get. I think Cynthia will put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And it's about it. There are 52 content prompts for how to show up as your best self online. So if you're like, I don't know what to share about myself that will connect with people, download those content prompts, put them into action, and then people will be finding you and connecting with you in a new way.
Love it. Yes, I will be sharing that
Cool.
selfie guide. I might actually be downloading that selfie guide. I need
Do
some
it.
content prompts. But this was so great, Carrie. Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you.